Hey everyone, welcome to Triple V. I'm Mike Shanklin. In today's interview, I'm actually joined by Victor Pross. Victor Pross is the anarchist artist. You might have heard of him before. I've spread his work around for about the last year. Victor Pross is one of the best live caricatures in the business. Victor has quick wit and even a quicker marker. He is able to capture lightning-quick caricatures, providing a treasured keepsake and a good natural belly laugh for your guests. Victor's website actually states that Victor's wonderful caricatures can fire up your corporate events, birthday celebration, Christmas parties, social events, school events, bar mitzvahs, weddings, any and all occasions. How are you doing today, Victor?
Not too bad, Mike. You?
I'm doing pretty good, man. I can't complain. just another busy day over here in Shanklin land. We're doing good though, and I'm looking forward to this discussion because we're going to be hammering away on a variety of different things here. Really, though, we're going to be focusing on Venus Project and comparing that over to a voluntarist ideal. And before we get into this, really, let's kind of break this down for people who have never really even heard of the non-aggression principle or voluntaryism before. I always like to ask my guests, as you know, Victor, to explain how they usually describe or maybe explain the non-aggression principle to another person.
Yeah, absolutely. Like for the first time hearing this, there's a lot of people who are flirting with anarchism as a something to consider and to look over, and they might have been interested. But it's important to emphasize that the non-aggression principle is the absolute epicenter, the very core, the very ethical core of this philosophy. And there's a lot of different ways that people have defined non-aggression. You know, non-aggression, like in the sense of not yelling or spanking at children, that's all legitimate. Or even like verbal abuse, that might be something to be said there, of course. But when you get right down to it in the political sense, the non-aggression principle speaks to political freedom. And it means freedom from the initiation of physical violence. So really the core, though, is physical violence. Now that physical violence can take different forms. It can be like direct punch to your face, or chloroforming you, or shooting you, murdering you, harming you, physically harming you. But then it gets a little bit more abstract, you know, like, and that's where you have, you know, where taxes comes into it, for example. You know, people would say that, like, you know, taxes is theft, you know, but what's that got to do with physical violence? Well, it's got everything to do with physical violence, because if you don't pay your taxes, you know, as you said yourself, and Stefan Molyneux is something has elaborated upon it, like it's a series of steps. You'll get some nice little notes and letters and urgencies and notes, and if you come right down to it, if you do not pay your taxes, you just refuse to comply whatsoever, people will come to your door. If you physically resist them, you will be you have your face pressed right into the pavement, and you'll be taken off. And if you defend yourself like you would against any other attempted kidnapping, I mean, they will harm you or kill you. So but hearing phrases like taxation is theft, you know, a lot of people go, well, yeah, but I don't mind paying my fair share. So how is that a violation of this non-aggression principle that you're talking about? Like, I don't mind paying my fair share. You get that all the time. And I notice that kind of like tosses some anarchists and volunteers off who are not necessarily like really philosophically honed on the principles. But the fact of the matter, though, in such scenarios like that is that it's a simple case of, like, you have no other option. It's kind of like, well, that's good for you that you don't mind, but let's say that if you just decide to change your mind on that, too bad for you. If it's something that you can't opt out of without physical consequences, then it's a violation of the non-aggression principle. So it doesn't matter what how you feel about it. You know, if you change your mind, too bad. It's the same standing. You're paying. That's it. So it's important to understand too that with the non-aggression principle, it's a matter of not just physical violence, but it has to be something that's against your will, because you can have two boxers step into the ring and punch each other's lights out, but it's a voluntary agreement, you know, for the sportsmanship of it, or because they're getting paid. It's an arrangement. So so that's not it's not just physical violence in itself, because you have violent sports, but it has a combination of the threat of physical violence, the actual application of physical violence against a person's will. So this is the crucial thing. That's what distinguishes the non-aggression principle from any other forms of coercion, whether it be verbal against children and whatnot. But it really pertains to in the political sense, freedom from the initiation of physical violence and not its retaliatory use.
Yeah, but Victor, some people who believe in the state would say you get a choice to vote in it. So doesn't that make a difference in it? Because you get a choice now, right? Because, at least you get to vote. I mean, some people don't even get to vote. Isn't voting making it all better?
No. Voting is the smoke screen. That's just the choice of people who's going to physically rule over you. It's the illusion of choice. But it's all one-headed monster. So the whole left-right paradigm, they pretty much have the same agenda, and they only differ on very superficial levels. It's still on the fundamental issue of the non-aggression principle. You vote one in, you're just voting for your captor, for your thief in command. So it's so it doesn't. But even if you do vote for somebody and say, well, I voted for that person, I gave my sanction and whatnot, what you're doing is violating the rights of other people who want nothing to do with the system and maybe voted for the other guy. So you're still, in that sense, in a very indirect sense, sanctioning evil in the application of violating the non-aggression principle. So the whole voting system, it's a rigged system, it's a smokescreen, it's just a delusion that we have choice.
Right, and I obviously agree with you. The one way I like to describe it to people who might not have heard this before is to say, before you look at the state, really look at your individual life and how you have all these different peaceful decisions that you can make on your own life, right? So I want to buy this type of a car, I want to spend my money this way, I don't want to buy that. In these cases, the state can only monopolize or at least oligopolize. They'll take some of your choices, if not most of them, and give them into a central authority that makes all the decisions for you, whether you like it or not. Your vote's only worth, as I've done the calculation, if you have 150 million people in the United States, and you are the one voter, and we'll say this is obviously a presidential election, so you're out of 150 million people, that actually comes out, you can do the math on this, 0.00000000666 continuation. Your vote is nothing. It matters little. Whereas before the state, you oligopolized and monopolized all your peaceful choices. You had, direct choice and options on every single thing in your life. Now they don't just. It's not that the state is just there to protect us from bad people. They often become the bad people in the end. Everything that you strive to create to protect you ends up enslaving you down the road, is what it seems like. It's not like it's a Matrix 4 theme, but I think that's a pretty good analogy. Looking at the system, though, really all they can do is just monopolize your choices. So I completely agree with what you're saying on the voluntarism and non-aggression principle and axiom. It's obviously something that needs a lot more attention, and you're not seeing it in the mainstream today, unfortunately. This kind of brings us to maybe your road, how you came down this road to where you are today, to understand how you look at the world around you. And I'd like to hear some about your artwork too, but if you could really go back to a younger age, what kind of a household or a family you were raised in? Did you go to public, private, homeschool? What did your parents practice peaceful parenting? I'm really interested in hearing your life story coming up to the point where you understood voluntarism and where you're taking it now.
Yeah, sure. As for my biological parents, they were a complete train wreck. So I'm happy to say that I was raised by more sane people than what my parents were. That was my grandparents. And yes, to answer your question, I did go to public school.
Victor,
and I do remember very distinctly that remembering some frustrated vibes coming from my grandmother, who would tutor me at home and try to remedy what she considered to be a very inadequate education that I was receiving. So, and she would send me to private tutorial, private teachers during the summertime when I was off. So I know that there was, when I'm able to think back on it now, I know that we never had this conversation, but when I pieced everything together on memory and recall, with my later knowledge, I could tell that she was dissatisfied with what was going on, and she tried to remedy it by educating me at home. And I do remember distinctly, as a very young boy, of thinking that this is like very prison-like, and very degrading and humiliating, like all my natural instincts that we all have. I remember like having a crush on my girl, passing her a note. The teacher found out about it and made me stand up in the middle of the class to read the note to the entire class, and it was kind of like a degrading, humiliating experience. One drop in the bucket of like of a lot of little episodes like that. I kind of will play on a kid's psychology. So I remember. So for the most part, whatever friends that you make in school, you have warm memories here and there, and that's a lot of people recall those instances, and they kind of like have a softer spot when it comes to schooling, but they kind of block out and dilute all the negative impact that they can take from it as well. Because it's just a coping mechanism. And, but later on as a teenager, I was the type of person that figured, I don't know, it was just a natural gravitation towards, philosophy. I wasn't happy with the intellectual hand-me-downs. I had a very sneaky suspicion that everything that was being told to me, wasn't necessarily true. And I just followed that thread with a cat following a ball of yarn, and I just followed and unraveled it and became very, put on a philosophical detective cap and just started to look behind the curtain, as it was, and I thought, like, I want to see the world through fresh eyes. I want to know what is true. I want to separate bullshit from fact, and it was just a suspicion that, like mainstream ideas, that they're just not necessarily true, and I just followed that instinct.
Yeah, and if you think about it too, it really is like a smokescreen that's put in front of children when they're raised in status families. They have no way of reaching for rationality and truth and reason, and obviously the public education system. I've touched on this many times, and I think it's such an important point. I will repeat this in every video I make until the end of my life.
Oh, absolutely.
It's the fact that the state will never be able to truly touch on the rationality and at least take it to the rational conclusion. They'll never be able to take voluntarism and the non-aggression principle to its rational conclusion. In other words, they will never be able to say to kids, the non-aggression principle extends to this point, which means I am in violation of the non-aggression principle. They're not going to expose themselves, right? I mean, we're foolish to think that. So really, children, and it's not just a few. It's most of the people around us have had this smokescreen in front of them, and they're masked with all of this culture that has been mind rot in itself. I know you're very critical of culture, and I am very happy for that. But it is how much of a role does culture really play in this whole thing? I know you're a very, very vocal advocate on the culture aspect and what it does to kids and everybody. So I want to hear your touch on culture, if you could maybe explain that to some of the listeners.
Well, yeah, sure. The culture, for the most part, is human beings are we have the abstract abilities to be very creative. We can. This is where like the arts come into it, where we ever since time immemorial, since way before recorded history, we've created the arts. The world of the arts is something that's universal. Anywhere on the face of the globe that you'll find caveman drawings on the walls, you'll find that we've been like musically inclined, that we like to tell stories, make believe stories, tales of conquest and characters, and we have like icons, we have idols, we erect statues. This has been going on for a long time, and it's universal right across the board. But when it comes to, and a lot of people think of the term culture as just meaning the arts, but that's not necessarily the case at all. Like a culture is all-encompassing. It includes the building of nations. It includes like titles of privilege, noblemen and kings and whatnot. And that's also a matter of theater and drama and make-believe as well. So culture really is the lie. It's kind of like you know, Hitler had this thing about like don't lie small but like lie big, give the big lie. Well, culture is just exactly that. It is the humongous, all-encompassing, global, universal big lie. Because you'll find that the type of gods that you worship, the type of different political systems, or what you're to bow down to as being like as if it was metaphysically true. You know, this political system and these people are all special and divinely inspired, and the justification of the ruling of over people, the divine right of kings, or you have a right to vote, so it's a participatory, or you're participating within this government, the government by the people, for the people, et cetera, or the worshiping the state, and God, and Hitler is God on earth, and whatever the brand and flavor of statism is, it's just all make-believe. It's all just one humongous pile of bullshit. So that's what I mean when I say that culture is the lie. And so you have this play between, like, the arts, which is recreating reality, but is not itself reality, and you include all of culture. It's just all one theater. It's all big make-believe. But you'll find, though, within the sciences, tangible, empirical sciences, of course, that if you roll a ball in China, and if you roll a ball in the United States, the physical properties is that it's a round circle, so it'll roll across the floor. If you do that to a brick, it'll remain inert. I mean, all these type of things, everything, the physical sciences, and physics is physics, and anywhere you are in the world, just as mathematics is what it is throughout the world. So that's what distinguishes, the physical sciences from culture, and that's you're right to emphasize that one word in there, because it is cult is the operative word there when you have culture.
Yeah, let's bring this back. I want to real quickly have you kind of close up on your life, how you got, really to the point. How old were you, and where were you in life when you found voluntarism and stuff like that?
Well, yeah, I've always been interested in philosophy from being a teenager, and I've gravitated towards the works of Ayn Rand and Objectivism. I went through my Objectivist phase there, and which I still retain in a large part, in terms of like Rand's metaphysics and epistemology, right. Made departures from her in aesthetics. And the whole idea, of course, I went the route the way that a lot of other people did. You go through the trenches of small government, and then you kind of break it down and go like, well, the government should have the functions of military to protect us from a foreign aggression, the police to protect us from domestic violence, and then the courts for breach of contracts, or to settle, contractual disputes, if not the breach of. So, and I figured, but as you follow that same ball of yarn as you're investigating, you finally get to the point of that if you keep on following it, and just not lock yourself into one set of ideology, whether it be objectivism, but just giving yourself that one name. Philosophy is ongoing. It's ongoing. So I didn't want to be frozen into this little block called objectivism. So I became more curious and investigative in regards to other thoughts, and I thought, like, here's a school of anarchism that's questioning the whole paradigm of having a government, never mind limited, but just the very idea of it. So it's I just put it, you put it all together. It's just kind of like, well, it's not, having a government or a state is not axiomatic. It's like it's not like a law of nature. Itself is just a human institution that's opened up to a critique, an investigation, and if it doesn't make any sense to you, if it's not moral, if it's not ethical, or if it's just contrary to the facts, going back to what I was saying about culture, it's a human convention. It's a human convention. It's one that doesn't work all too clearly for 6,000 years, right? So it's just another part of culture, and you can see how governments change all over the world. So it's not an axiom. It's not a scientific fact. It's blood theater in this case now.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Now, let's take this to the next step, okay? Because I have a lot of people who are looking for solutions, which I applaud anybody who is trying to work towards a better life or a better world, and I applaud them on a level, but we have to examine everything under a microscope. We have to get, we have to look at it and really examine it, break it down to the subatomic particle level, right? So let's look at one solution that has been proposed. I know a bulk of tonight's discussion is going to be on this. We're going to be getting into the Venus Project in just a second. What is it? To those who have not researched the Venus Project, I'll include a link to a couple videos in the description section below. Yeah. So you guys can check that out. But to people who have not heard of the Venus Project before, it is basically a society that calls for central planning through robots, if I'm not mistaken, or some type of technological advancement that's supposed to end scarcity and the rest of this. How do you describe the Venus Project to others?
Well, basically, just to start off with, it does sound very engaging, and it is like the application of taking advantage of modern sciences, which the Venus Project or the Zeitgeisters would say have not yet been fully utilized, but the technology is there in terms of computers and robotics, and to have what they call a fair distribution of the goods and the services and whatnot. And there's a lot of people, and they're very critical of the current system. I mean, they can be plotted on that. Like they would be in on a surface level would be in agreement with the anarchist voluntarist position, but on a very superficial surface level, in the sense of they have a very definite critique of the modern paradigm, such as it is the indoctrination of children, the mercantilism, the crony capitalism, and that's all well and good. And there's a lot of people who are it attracts primarily a lot of young people. So there are a lot of people, very intelligent, thoughtful people, who see that their future possibly could be turning into to ashes before them. So they're open to alternative ways of looking at the world, of alternative ways of dealing with solutions other than what's being placed before them. And I applaud those people for that. But on the downside, if you want me to get into that now.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So just let me give you a quote from Peter Joseph, the foremost exponent of the Zeitgeist movement, and I'll quote him here, and then we can take it from there, from this quote. And I quote: "If it wasn't for the state, the free market would have self-destructed 1,000 times over. It is the state that stops the monopolies that are the natural gravitations within the system. It's the legal structures that keeps things under control, with the rapid amount of corruption that is built within the system as everyone gains for strategy and preferential advantage. If it wasn't for the state regulation and the legal system, we would have a circus of monkeys throwing feces at one another, trying to steal anything and everything. If it wasn't for the state, this system would have self-destructed a long time ago." So now we can see here that just by this quote here from Peter Joseph, he's the foremost exponent of the Zeitgeist movement, that he's speaking very favorably of the state. So this might confuse a lot of people and go, well, I thought he was critical of the present paradigm, of the paradigm of which the anarchist is critical of. But this is the mistake, is that he's criticizing what is known as state capitalism. So it's not like he's necessarily against the state qua state, and he is not necessarily, obviously, speaking against central planning. Central planning is very much a part of the Venus Project. So that's where they would make a complete departure from the anarchist voluntarist position. So with all the bailouts and the crony capitalism and all of that junk, which they're legitimate to criticize, they're also tossing out the component parts within that system, such as they are the remnants that are still left, the profit motive, the idea of private property, all the the status bathwater is being thrown out with the freedom baby, if you want to put it that way. So it's what they call state capitalism that they're against. But if you look at what they're throwing out, you have there's another individual that I was speaking to in the Zeitgeist movement, and he states that it's a fallacy of many free market advocates to immediately jump from voluntarism to a free market. And I would say that voluntarism and a free market are inextricably linked. Okay, they're indivisible terms. And because if you look at what a free market is, if you strip it away from all the grime of the neo-buzz, the neocon buzz from it, it just simply means that no people or no group of people can use physical coercion against other people, and the way that you gain any kind of economic power or advantage can be achieved only by voluntary means. And so this means that the mechanism of the free market simply reflects and sums up all the economic choices and decisions of all the participants. That's what a free market is. So it's not like the free market is like some kind of floating abstraction that's kind of like separate over there. It's got nothing to do with crony capitalism. It's got nothing to do with the state giving a preferential treatment to the super rich or anything like that. It just means it's just the net result of a lot of millions of people interacting with one another in the field of trades of goods and services. So free market simply means freedom. So that's all it means, right? So this is what they're against. This is what they're against, and you'll notice that they equivocate, on all of these terms. It's a very glossary, semantic game with them. And, a lot of other people who speak the language are duped by it, though. But I'm talking about its foremost practitioners of this movement, is that they're very slimy sophists. And that most definitely includes Peter Joseph, obviously there.
Yeah, so. Well, I just want to add real quick, I'll let you keep ranting here. I love what you're saying. If he's afraid of people stealing, it's just kind of ironic that the state is theft. It is what legally steals. If he is against theft, then how can he be for the state, which is and only guarantees theft? It's just like he doesn't understand individual freedom. He is lost in status fear-mongering. And one thing I think is really interesting, too, that I always hear from the Venus Project side, camp, is talking about how they're going to end scarcity, right? Like the market doesn't already have, like the participants of the market, you and I, don't already have a goal in that. Now we might be stopped from producing and the rest of that, and trying to find this efficiency and reducing at least scarcity, through not having these middlemen come in here and try to control all of the economic. Yeah, think of how many negative externalities go into the economy every day through tax loopholes and subsidies and barriers to entry. It's favoritism for one company over another, right? So it's gonna have its favoritism. It's going to obviously taint the market and all economic production that's in that. So it's not like the market's not trying to at least reduce scarcity. It's realistic to understand that you're not going to. Here's one question I have for Venus Project people. How are you going to end time scarcity, right? They act like scarcity is just food and water and shelter, and that's all that scarcity is, right? Well, they're obviously not taking scarcity to its rational definition, because what about time scarcity? Time is scarce too, right? Even Bill Gates has to think about, if there's $1 on the floor and he's going to a meeting where he's going to make $1 million, does he bend over and pick up that $1 bill, or will he make money, more money by not being late to this meeting that could make him $1 billion or whatever, right? So, there's time scarcity that you'll never be able to stop in the world. How am I going to, if I want to ski in the Alps and swim in the ocean, and my doctor tells me I have 2 months left? There's time scarcity, right? We obviously have a conclusion of life. What are they going to do? Make life last forever? Even if that's the case, even during that period of time, you can't do two things at once, even if you really wanted to, right? So this goes way down to a philosophical level that I don't think that the Venus Project people have thought of when they talk about ending scarcity. That is a very strong claim. I want to hear your opinion on that.
Well, yeah, basically there's you certainly give me a mouth, an earlobe to deal with there, though. Yeah, but this just all comes back to the sophistry of the term too, and just like we were talking about at the opening of the show of like of force, you'll notice too, and I've seen this kind of ploy being used like several times. It's not just like one isolated individual who did it though, but you have this equivocation and of the word force. You know, they'll talk about like, so you mean to tell me that a guy who has a couple of degrees and he can't do any better out there in this marketplace of yours than getting a job at Walmart? What about the coercion there, huh? What about the coercion there? He's working for $10 an hour. And you can see that the equivocation, you know, right there. The system is internally coercive that way, and it's kind of like it's ridiculous. Like the relationship between the employer and the employed is not one of coercing the other. So that's why I took great pains to defining the non-aggression principle and what that means at the outset. But where you do have coercion here, which is not being focused on and not being focused on for a purpose, is the fact of like of all the other things that are clustering around this arrangement between the employer and the employee, the type of currency that they're forced to use in payment for the services, and all the other deleterious effects that statism has that's not immediately visible, you know, that's taking place around them. It's not just the monopolization of the currency. If they had that's all internally coercive right there. But on more practical levels of what you were talking about, like it is true that the pricing mechanism is required to perform economic calculations in order to rationally allocate resources, and this is where scarcity comes into it as well, of course. So it is the lack of such a market feedback mechanism that will correct errors or offer a guidance for all the participants in a free market. And in regards to scarcity, if you do not have the pricing mechanism, you do have a breakdown of the economy. And this is something that's, it's not like a theoretical claim I'm making. It's something that's been proven to be the case empirically and historically. And that's precisely why this central planning does not work. And I want to emphasize that for people who are listening, that the system that is being proposed by the Zeitgeisters is one of central planning. And that is what has the internal flaw within it. You know, like computers do not sit inert. They have to be programmed. And they would necessarily be programmed by a small cadre of people, a small handful of people. And so the substitution of a free market, which, like I say, is just a mechanism that reflects and sums up all the economic choices and decisions made by all the participants, of all the free people who are voluntarily exchanging with one another, and this is going to be done with a computer, which means central planning. So, because it's completely meant to substitute all those choices that people can make. And it's going to be, and all their decisions are going to be immediately cramped and stymied and narrowed down to the dictates of a centralized computer programmed by a handful of people. Does this make sense at all of what I'm saying?
Oh, definitely. And I'd like to touch on money for a second and what's going on in today's society so people understand we're not supporting the system today, and obviously I know Victor's not. What we're saying is that the system today is trapped through things like legal tender laws, where we're forced to accept certain types of legal tender, which is, in this case, is FRNs, which is Federal Reserve Notes. We don't have the ability of competing currencies. If somebody tries to start up their own gold or silver bullion and have a medium of exchange, they get arrested, right? So, I mean, there's always the threat that we cannot have competing currencies out here. That is a problem in today's society. But currency is nothing more than a representation of value, right? So if you have a certain amount of value or wealth that you are trying to preserve, you're usually going to, and you want to trade with others and maybe have, not have to cut up an ox every time you need 3 things of milk, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. If you're going for that type of society, where you can actually have this medium of exchange to kind of divvy up stuff, that is completely peaceful, 100% part of voluntarism. If you don't want to have money, you don't have to. But people who do want to have money and medium of exchange and currency just to represent their wealth and trade easily, that's nothing wrong with that. In fact, that is what enables, like he was saying, the pricing system, so that we know what value is worth what to somebody else in the market, theoretically, at least what is going to be on the market for goods to be sold and traded at. Maybe not the inherent value of a person. Like, I might have a car for 10 years and I really love it and it's worth more to somebody else. Well, that's why I own it, and somebody else doesn't, right? So there's rational reasons that we're supposed to have currency. The problem is we're trapped to a monopoly of currency from the Federal Reserve, from the U.S. state, and that's from all states are trapped to fiat currency now. None of them are backed technically by tangible precious metals and silver and gold or any of that. So really, it's just you're backed by the full faith of government, which is what leads to the Weimar republics and the Zimbabwe's out there, where you basically just have hyperinflation that kicks in, and economies suffer, and the people, which are the economy, suffer as well. So it's really important for us to realize we do want to fix society. We just want to have the individual choices made by individuals. If they want to have a robot that central plans their life, they want to divvy it out to somebody else, well, we might disagree with that opinion. They have the right to do that. But we do not want to be forced into anything that's going to have central planning. So the Venus Project could not be implemented throughout the world per se, like voluntarism is, because you could maybe have a Venus Project or a commune group in one sector of voluntarism. That's possible, but you can't have a world of Venus Project and then have people opt out. At least if you're going to have a world of Venus Project, you'd have to allow people to opt out. And I don't see really anything about the Venus Project which allows people to opt out. It says basically, you're not going to be able to own private property. The free market.
Exactly.
Yeah. So let's
exactly.
move on. Go ahead.
The opting out part there. Remember when I was talking about the guy? Oh, I don't mind paying my fair share of taxes. Well,
right.
If you can't opt out of that, it's coercive. So. And that goes here. If this is something that's going to be all-encompassing, where you can't opt out and have have this medium of exchange, that's the thing with a voluntary society. It's kind of like, there's no like central plan of like how the overall on a micro level of how things are going to operate. In a lot of cases we don't know. Like the whole thing of like, well, what about the fire stations? What about this? What about that? There's a lot of that's the challenge that's put to anarchists is like, well, how is this all going to work? How's it? Nobody in a society of division of labor, intellectual labor as well, not just physical labor. In a society where there is a division of labor, you don't have to be an expert on everything. You can't answer these questions. And it's very interesting to note that Peter Joseph, he does define money as a social convention for managing scarcity and rewarding creation. And in reality, money is just a method of means to facilitate exchange between individuals. So it's one error after another with these people. And as you've just touched on, there's many resources have been used as money. That could be grains, that could be salts, that could be metal, that could be gold, that could be silver. But we're forced to, of course, to use this fiat money. And this is what he's calling like capitalism. Everybody can agree with like the fiat money and the inflation of the dollar and whatnot. This is kind of like, it's causing a lot of trouble, and that's what the Zeitgeisters do. They go see all this crap. See, that's capitalism. Yeah, you see, that's capitalism. There's your free markets for you. And it's kind of like, how can these people be that stupid? They're not stupid. They're very intelligent. So you can tell. Just because when you do look at it, though, this is something it's not complicated to figure out. That freedom, the full application of the non-aggression principle, you would be able to have competing currencies. That it would be freedom. That would be free markets. But what they're calling the free market, though, is this fiat currency, which people can see is not working. That there's problems with it, and that's what they're latching on to. They're very critical of statism in a very indirect way, but what they're calling statism is state capitalism, and with all the crap that's within that, they're purposely pushing in all those component parts of freedom as well, of legitimate definitions of freedom, and they're making one big giant package deal out of it. So that's the thing that I want to stress there. So I would definitely say to the young people is find out what voluntarism is, separate that from actual status components, separate them. You know, it's a little bit of intellectual legwork there to do, you know, but you can do it once you get a full grasp on what the non-aggression principle is, that you can separate all the component parts.
All right, and let's take this to the next step. Peter Joseph obviously does not understand, no matter what he wants to say and his supporters want to say, they don't understand that they've never really researched the non-aggression principle. I've done a lot of research on him. You've done a lot of research on him. He never really even understands how a free market differs from the society of today. I mean, he might be able to say, well, you know, I can understand why people like you guys out there would support voluntarism over this, but it's all really the same thing. No, it is not the same thing. And let's take this to the next step. Let's get into,
you can see the package deal, right?
Right. Let's get into the robots. Let's prove it's central planning, right? So he's going to have all these little machines and robots running around here and tending to the wheat, which is great. Don't get me wrong. I love machines. I love technology. I want technological advancement more than anything, and that's why, more than anything, I want a competitive market where it's not monopolized. So, but taking this next step with the Venus Project, right? Yeah. He's going to have all these robots that go around here that really somebody else is going to program for you. It doesn't sound like you're going to get to own the robot. It's going to be centrally planned by some central collective, and that means somebody's going to have to program this robot or this computer. So it's going, all input of every computer out there is really just the aggregate of individual programmers and technicians and engineers that are actually out there on the front lines programming this stuff. So it's all input from another real human being, another person, another individual.
Where you've had philosopher kings, now you have scientist kings, right?
Right. So we have, you know, this system where they're going to be doing this for us. You know, obviously Peter Joseph just doesn't understand the non-aggression principle at all. He's so far off base from understanding that every decision, whether we want these robots in our lives or not, should be completely voluntary and by choice. And it looks like he's just usurped individual rights, favors this other system, because without some system up there, we have to have some central planning or we'll all be in chaos. That is just fear-mongering. Basically, Peter Joseph is just stuck and lost in status fear-mongering. He doesn't understand that most people out there are actually pretty good people. Our friends, our families, our neighbors, our coworkers. Sure, there are some bad people out there. A lot of them are inside of the state too, so we can't forget that either. But at the same time, most people are actually, the market does not allow for as much corruption as the state. It doesn't allow for the theft. It doesn't allow for the sovereign immunity and the lack of accountability and irresponsibility that comes with it, which we could go into numerous examples of government falling into this category where private industry, somebody would be fired immediately for that if they did that to a private business and lost a lot of their consumers' money. There's no room for this kind of inefficiency in a system of voluntarism where trade can only be legalized through freedom and peaceful interactions and voluntary, non-coercive means, basically. But it sounds like, to me, looking at this whole thing, Victor, that they just have no idea. They forget that the individual is the one who are supposed to be making the decisions over their own lives, and it just sounds like somebody else trying to control you more and more.
Well, yeah, and another thing too. This is another very important thing to consider as well. And like whatever critiques that I've seen of Zeitgeisters is the one that I haven't seen, but which occurs to me. And tell me what you think. It basically. I've heard Peter Joseph and I've heard other people kind of like scoff at the whole idea of the Venus Project, or the Zeitgeisters being compared to old-fashioned Marxists, But like in a lot of senses, it definitely is beyond the central planning part. But another thing to consider too is that just like the original socialists or the communists. They just look at society. They most especially during Karl Marx's time with the rise of the Industrial Revolution. They just looked at this society unfolding around them, with marvelous inventions being created and the advancement of from agricultural right out of the Middle Ages, and here's this Industrial Revolution with all these goods popping up before them, and they just look at it as like, wow, that's amazing. Hey, so how are we going to have the whole focus is on distribution and not so much on the creation? What was the conditions that made it necessary to make all these goods flourish in the first place. So the utilization of resources that just remain just raw materials in the earth for hundreds and thousands of years. They just looked at it and go, "Wow, the goods are just here. They're just here. They just fell from the heavens." So they don't have any focus whatsoever on what made that possible. And the answer, of course, is freedom. Free markets, free people, free minds has made it all possible. But they just looked at it and they go, "Well, how are we going to distribute this? How are we going to have an equal distribution?" It just all became a matter of distributing the goods, but not asking about how they came. And that's exactly the same mistake that the zeitgeisters are making. They're talking about, like, there's enough resources to feed the entire population. So it's just kind of like, yep, the goods are here. So how are we going to deal with the distribution so that nobody has to work or toil? All they have to do is push a button and make their request for what they want, and we're going to have this rational allocation of these precious resources. But where does this leave innovation, though? I mean, they're proceeding from the premise that we've advanced far enough now. You know, whatever level of modern technology that we're at right now, we can just remain stagnant and stay where we are. Now it's just the resources are here. Now it's just a matter of how we're going to distribute it, and that's their entire focus.
Yeah. And, you know, I also like to always bring up the example of central planning and the cycle of nations. Basically what happens is a lot of one region will go through a revolution, and then in some cases, because, you know, obviously most of the people were upset and they revolted against whatever bad government was, extremely bad government was there at the time, they usually shrink the government somewhat, usually a lot, and then over hundreds of years, as economic prosperity begins, the state basically begins to grow exponentially like a parasite to suck off the wealth of what was created in a free society, and then the cycle brings it back down. This is where the drop begins, and more poverty happens, and then they have another revolution. Instead of continually propping up small governments and then letting the large governments come in later on, and we have a revolution and go back to small government, it's just like, it is theatrical in the effect that we should just, once we have the next revolution, we should try out the no government thing for a chance, you know? Be like, yeah. We really don't need to set off this ticking time bomb that's going to go off in 2 centuries, you know? I mean, that's just like, if that's not social irresponsibility, I don't know what is. And I think at this point in history, enough people should have come to this rational conclusion that the cycle is always going to go in the same route. And this is what happens when you centralize power to central planners, who are technically going to steal your property from you, whether you like it or not, right? When you do not respect the individual components of a collective, the collective itself will reflect that, and usually negatively. So that's what we have to remember. Every collective is just a group of individuals, and throughout this collective, every individual should have their own individual freedoms and choice, as long as they're peaceful and voluntary. That's what we need to be encouraging, not some other utopian-styled sounding central planning. The battle that humanity needs to face now is forced central planning versus individualism and freedom. That's really the battle. You know, you could label it anarchy or voluntarism or the rest of it. It comes down to, are you going to have your life central planned by some other dictate, pope, king, president, congressman, or some other kind of a bureaucrat? Or are you going to own your own life? You're going to have your own freedoms. You're going to make your own choices, and in some cases, unfortunately, deal with the consequences of some of your bad decisions. That's how we learn. That's how we get better. And the system today is nothing geared towards individual freedom. That is the root of the problem. Trying to ignore that and switch to some other kind of a central planned solution is only going to continue the problem. It's not going to fix the problems in society, such as large-scale warfare, huge poverty, where the government spends more money on anti-poverty, programs today, and the government numbers as of recently just came out and says about 1 in 6, and actually I think it's 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 kids is in poverty. And food stamps now, what is it? About a third of the nation is on food stamps. It reminds me of Egypt with their bread and their thing. Egypt just went through this whole thing. It's just, I mean, you can see us voluntarists. It looks like we've had this telescope out for a long time, right? We're on this organic piece of dirt flying through the Earth, and we look up at this other planet, right, Victor? And we see this other planet through the telescope, and it is in chaos and hell. And then we get closer, and for some reason, our planets continue to get closer and closer and closer, like a gravitational pull. And in the telescope lens, we start to see, wait, That's us in the future. There's some kind of a time dilation. And so while we're looking at this telescope and we see ourselves in the future, there's a ton of people who don't even know there's a telescope to look through. Right? I mean, there's this telescope that you can see everything out there, and we're saying, hey, will you just come look in this telescope real quick? That's us through time dilation in the future. That's what we're leading to, and nobody really wants to pay attention to it. They're just out there with what's that girl's name? Betty Boo? I don't know. The fat girl model, and, American Idol, and all this other junk that is just mind rot. It doesn't increase your individual freedom. It doesn't help stop corruption in the world. It doesn't help do anything. Maybe it feeds your mind for 6 hours a day and keeps you preoccupied so you don't look at the world around you, but that's all it really is, and that's kind of the world we're stuck in today. And I'm not saying we don't want forms of entertainment and the rest of that. If you want to watch a show, go ahead. Just realize it's actually negatively impacting your life, and it's not really going to build anything. Just like trying to throw up another central planned system like the Venus Project is not going to bring us more peace and prosperity. Just the opposite. It's just going to divert attention. It's a distraction away from the voluntarist and non-aggression principles, and it does nothing to advance society and humanity into the future. I do like the fact that they're at least not afraid of technology. I think if there's one thing I can say positive about the Venus Project, Victor, it's that they're not afraid of technology per se. That's a good start, because there's a lot of people out there who are anti-technology still. Oh, I'm afraid of this damn computer. This thing's going to take over and all the rest of that stuff. Listen.
The environmental movement or whatnot.
Yeah, not just that. I technically am an environmentalist. I just don't think that central planning is going to fix the environment. I think only the free market's going to solve the environmental problems. You know what I mean? So there's just a lot of craziness out there. Every single individual is a free, autonomous thinking individual, right? So it's not like we have the Matrix where we plug into and everybody can think the same thing, right? We don't create Captain Planet. That doesn't happen. We got to be a little bit more rational. That even though the statist, cartoons when you were a child were very entertaining, they also had subliminal messages in there, and I think it's important for us to not, to at least point that out. But I think
just to extrapolate what you were saying there.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, the whole thing about doing the same thing over and over again, humanity has been on a hamster wheel, and it's the same central ideas, but it's just the verbiage changes, But you have to get right down to not be distracted by different verbiage. You just have to look at the inner guts of the philosophical movement, and I studied. At York University, I took intellectual history with Professor John Redpath, and that's one thing that I do notice is that as we were going throughout the centuries in this course of major philosophical and intellectual movements, you can notice that it's like you know how people have said history repeats itself. It is true. It really is true. Of how the same garbage is just going around and around and around on this merry-go-round, and the zeitgeisters aren't any different than that. So in the course, when I was reading a lot of the medievalists and the socialists, I could see there was one thing that you can definitely see is being repeated over and over again, and that's a longing for a society in which human beings' existence would be automatically guaranteed to them, and in which every person would not have to bear responsibility for their own survival. So you see this longing for that, and that's where religion comes into it. There's a grand overseer of the entire universe to guide us. I don't want to feel like I'm alone and responsible for my own actions, and then that's also where the state comes into it. You have the grand earthly overseer that's going to run everything and make sure everything is all smooth, and so there's there's a fear of a freedom from rapid change or challenge or the exacting demands of competition, and there's a longing for a society in which each must do their prescribed part and for the well-being of the whole. But no one would have to face the necessity of making choices and decisions that will crucially affect their own life, and the question of what has one earned or not earned won't be a consideration, and so this is what you find with the zeitgeisters once again. It's just this whole idea of a free market where you can fail, like where life is not, where prosperity or well-being or health or anything is not guaranteed as an ironclad guarantee, that becomes a little bit frightful for a lot of people, right? So they want this God, like no matter what is going to happen, you have the God of the entire universe. Anything that bad happens, it's just a mere illusion. It's a part of a greater scheme. It's a greater scheme, rather. And so it might seem like a disadvantage, but with my little finite mind, I guess I can't understand what God's will is, though. But it's all a part of the grand cosmic course, and you have that within religion. You have that within statism. We all have to look out for one another, like in the sense of like I don't want to fall through the traps. But this is the Garden of Eden that a free market or capitalism does not offer. It is not utopian in that sense. And so this is the type of mentality that you see being recycled over and over again throughout the centuries. And you find a lot of the petitioners of this type of mindset making their broadcasts to the world, like through sophistry, and there's a lot of people who are attracted to that. So the same kind of mentality that was attracted to Marxism and socialism for offering this Garden of Eden on earth, you have that with the practitioners, the foremost practitioners of the Zeitgeist movement, and that's why a lot of people are attracted to it as well. They look at a free market and they just see it as like status symbol seeking, of getting bigger, better cars, having 3 cars in the driveway, just hooring for status, beat the Jones. This is what they consider to be the free market, cutthroat, and where people will fall through the cracks and things like that. So, but criticisms of status hooer seekers, and the whole Gordon Gekko thing. I mean, that's the whole caricature of of capitalism. And you do have that mentality. But it's not central to a free market. So a free market just simply means people voluntarily exchanging with one another in goods and services. That's all it means. So if you want to live like a hippy dippy life, and you just want to live by a minimalist standard, but you still have to consume. You're a human being, flesh and blood. You have to keep body and soul together. So you will be a participant in this free market, but you don't have to be all caught up into the Gordon Gekko Wall Street scene of what the free market is, and that's the caricature of how a lot of people see it. So if you want to be this hippy dippy Angor's kind of person, where you throw if you join some kind of commune and throw all your goods into one collective pot and you distribute in that sense, I mean, great, like freedom, or it's still a free market. That's still a free market, because a free market just means freedom, people of voluntary association with one another. That's all that the anarchist position is coming from. Yep. So it's so you can see how this is the differentiating freedom and the free market from this whole zeitgeist scenario. They're completely on the other side of the philosophical fence.
Yeah, and why is it that statists just can't seem to, in a lot of cases, respect other people's property, individual property? Is that everyone is afraid of criminals, and it's kind of ironic because they end up becoming the criminals in the end, So they're so afraid of criminals they create millions of them. So anyway, I think that's kind of ironic. But the natural state, I think this is one thing for people to look at too. The natural state of humanity for most of its life was a poverty standard, right? And I'm not saying that's going to be going forward as technological advancement and the rest of that happens, and hopefully more freedom. But the natural state of humanity is really poverty. I like to use the example. Let's say you have 5 people, and they're out on an island, right? And one of them, it doesn't really matter how they got there. The concept of how they interact does. So let's say that there's just 5 people, and they get on this island, and for them to survive, they're going to have to cut down all these coconuts and maybe go hunting or fishing or something like that. So they're going to, maybe one of them goes out there and for like 18 hours he's slaving away. He's knocking up all these coconuts and getting them down and opening them up and saving the milk and the rest of that stuff. And he cuts up the coconut into nice little cubes and spends all day doing this, right? His whole life. And the other 4 guys, and maybe this doesn't just happen one day, it's happened week after week after week. They're just off jacking around, messing up, having a good time, and not really concerned with, getting the nuts ready for the squirrel's winter, right? So the rest of them are messing around. Does this mean that, in essence, when it's time for, the season hits and it starts to be winter or something like that, and the coconut, I don't know, this is an example, and the coconuts die off or something like that, and they're running low on food, and this other guy has been working his ass off and encouraging the others and saying, hey guys, come on, you guys got to do some of the work too. If he just says at one point, I don't want to, you guys are just a bunch of slackers, I come to these things and it seems like nobody's actually doing any real production here. It's just me, I'm like your slave now. I don't want to be a part of this anymore. You guys are just holding me down. I'm just going to go live on my side of this island. You guys can stay over here. Can we just respect each other? That really is the point where voluntarists and the rest of society differ. Because the voluntarists would say, even if I was one of the 4 who had been messing around and jacking around, which I wouldn't have done it, but knowing, been in those shoes, I would have, even as a voluntarist, said, you know what, I messed up, man. You know what? Maybe I could work it off. Can I give you a massage every day or something like that, and you can feed me some coconut? You just slaved for thousands of hours while we did nothing, or something to that effect. Why is it that the non-voluntarists believe that everybody else is entitled to this guy's hard work? That is not how a free society works. That is slavery. That is slavery right there in itself. But we're not even talking about it on a political issue. This has nothing to do with talking about government. We're just looking at or
the body politic or society composed of millions of people.
Yeah, we're just doing a case study of individuals here, right? Even on that level, most of us. But then we can take it to the next step, and we can say, hey, look at the state. This is the same thing in nature. But, they're just getting away with it all the time. That's all it is. And everybody thinks, oh, well, because we've had it, it must be good. Well, just because we had chain slavery for a long time, for thousands of years, doesn't mean chain slavery was good either. And technically, chain slavery still exists in some regions today, sadly. But, moving along back to the Venus Project, it is nothing but a radical ideal of central planning where everybody thinks that they own each other, and there's no ability for individual private property and individual choice. And every time that somebody tries to tell you what to do, they're limiting your free speech, in essence. They're limiting your individual self-ownership. They're limiting what productivity and what you could become. So, it might be hard to see things that are the unforeseen consequences of actions like the state. For instance, if they take $1 million out of the private sector for something, right? Well, that's $1 million out of the private sector no matter what. And let's say after all the corruption and the back-end deals, about $600,000 actually gets back to maybe being produced into the society. So they'll go off and buy a library. Well, everybody sees that library for that year, but nobody sees the $1 million they stole from the private sector, which would have given jobs. They don't look at the person who got laid off and say, oh, well, that was because of the theft. No, they blame it on freedom still. It's always, you got to make the scapegoat, right? You can't, and freedom doesn't have its own arbitrator. It's not like it has somebody who's standing up in the system and saying, I am freedom, Captain Freedom Planet came over here and he can represent himself. No, the statists are the individual representation of the system. The system is itself, right? So all the individuals who make up the state or central planning or whatever you want to call it are the ones who get to literally defend the system inside of the system. But there is no freedom human out there who is freedom and can go up to these judicial systems when some company says, hey, I want to have a wood tariff raised so that my violin competitor can't compete against me in this region. So they've basically helped oligopolize their own market. There's no freedom guy who goes up there and says, hi, I'm here to stand up against the tariff this company wants. No, it just goes through. That's just how government and statism works. It's slavery. So,
I see another flaw that's inherent within the philosophical structure of the movement comes to mind now. This is probably like something that's very, 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 very revealing, and that's the taking an ideological structure, and this has been something that's been repeated, the same mistake that's been repeated over and over by a lot of thinkers, where you can see that with the Zeitgeisters, the foremost practitioners of it, Peter Joseph, where and I remember Stefan Molyneux's conversation with one of the Zeitgeisters. There was like an exchange of videos that was done in answer to Peter Joseph, and then there's this one show where there's this extended conversation that Stefan was having with a Zeitgeister. I don't know if you've ever seen that video.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, Stefan definitely has much more. He was much more cordial and diplomatic with this individual than I probably could have been. So, but they were going on with a lot of things that we agree with the current the current system that's in place, and what a train wreck that it is. And Stefan was applauding the individual about for calling all the shots on that and public indoctrination. And the thing is that we're grind out into this system, like you say, for every person who's waking up, seeing the society around them for what it is. You have 10 other people behind them just going through the indoctrination process of public schooling. So it's like the little miniature mini statists are being popped out all the time. And and basically the focus here from the Zeitgeisters is it's just a mass indoctrination center of the state capitalism, and so it's the system itself that is producing these people. So the error there is to assume that once you change the system, you change the mentality. It doesn't matter if you're an infant or a full-blown adult. That once you change the system, once we have it all centrally planned, and remove the shackles of capitalism and the profit motive and private property and et cetera and things like that, we'll have a new human being. And you find this within Marxist ideology, as with a lot of other ideologies as well. You have this entire new human being, this anti-self, altruist, collectivized mentality, with the overthrow of one system to another. Now that's the fatal flaw. But what they're trying to do is bypass everything that makes a human being, with all because human beings, just like anything else in the universe, has a definite nature. They have a specific, unalterable, definite nature of who they are, and so they want to bypass everything that makes a human being, and stuff them into ideologies, and they're just meant to comply and completely adapt to that ideology. And whereas Stefan, on the other hand, as a philosopher, he recognizes that no, we have to go not to ideology, we have to go to the sciences. We have to go to understanding what human beings are. We have to look at the human being and not stuff human beings into ideologies. And so that's why he has this whole series of focusing on child rearing, the Bomb in the Brain series. So he's completely this is where I'll give all kudos to Stefan Molyneux for breaking the mold of this hamster wheel that I was talking about, and that's to study the actual human being and not to set up ahead of time some grand ideological structure which we're to stuff human beings into. Is that we're to look at the human being and study the human being, and to have a social system that will flow from the proper study of human beings, and that system of that's conducive to the flourishing and the betterment of humanity is freedom.
Yeah,
it's the freedom of the individual, the freeing of the mind, and the external as existential freedom as well. Whereas the Zeitgeisters is just right back down to central planning and collectivism, and it has all the Marxist trappings, has all the theological trappings as well, and just give it a shiny, glossy 21st century veneer to the whole thing to sell it to the modern mind.
Yeah, and I find it funny how statists want to tell everyone else how to live their lives, and they themselves are not ethical and honest, down to their own base. Obviously, I think one of the root problems is most people just haven't even heard or researched the non-aggression principle, and that's why we're here today. I actually got a question for you, Victor. This one's from Jennifer Adams. She wants me to ask you, where do you see America, say, in 5 years?
American in 5 years, yeah. Well, I mean, like, short of pretending that I have a crystal ball that I'm looking into, at that point in time, like with the collapse of the dollar or complete economic collapse, that is something that's definitely possible within within 5 years. But I do see, I see the ever increasing escalation as what is going on now. Large swaths of society waking up and at an incredible pace, just as they are today. Because I'm truly, I mean, for every American Idol, no brain, dipshit, empty pecan brain that's patriotic, jingoistic moron that's out there, I do see right behind them a lot of people that are waking up, and that's the amazing thing with the internet, where a lot of people previously just thought that they were kind of like some kind of freak lone wolves. But now that they're finding out that there's community out there, it just reminds me of the Canadian thinker Marshall McLuhan when he spoke of a global village. That global village now is the online world, and a lot of friendships and communities and are forging from that. I see that just simply increasing. And within the next 5 years, there's going to be a lot of calamity. There's going to be that's going to escalate. I mean, not to pretend that I'm coming here all sunny roses and things like that. The problems are going to escalate. And as they escalate, people are going to be more open. Large percentage of increasing people still will be like complete robotic dummies. But there's a lot, but there will be increasing people, especially young people, who will be looking for and entirely open to alternative ways of looking at life and to looking for alternative answers to what is currently present before them. And that's why even as we speak now that there's a large, as I mentioned before, there's a large component of people, of young people who are attracted to the zeitgeist precisely because it is an alternative way of looking at the world, and so you do have that, and that's why I think that what you're doing and what I do on to a lesser extent, and Stefan Molyneux of speaking up and offering these alternative of means of looking at the world. It is a competition. It is a free marketplace and competition of the world of ideas. You could put it that way as well. So we just have to make our message loud and clear, and not to let the zeitgeisters who are just going to put humanity right back onto that hamster wheel of everything that's failed before. We have to make our message loud and clear. So the bottom line of what my answer is, down the future is going to bring a lot more shit, but it's also along with it is going to open up a lot of doors of seeking solutions and the expansion of the individual and inquisitive, inquiring, intellectually curious people will join. Will find out about voluntarism and anarchism and be attracted to it as well.
Yeah, I want you to give a couple your website out and make whatever plugs you want to direct people to your work, and maybe a little closing statement before we head out.
Yeah, sure. I'm not sure if my website address is visible on the screen, but it is pros-entertainment.com. It's not a website that speaks directly to anarchism or voluntarism. It's more or less like a professional. My vocation as an illustrator / artist / caricaturist. But in regards to any kind of YouTube videos, I'm very easy to find. If you type in my name, Victor Pross, on YouTube, to find a lot of my videos where I do speak on philosophy and politics and the rest. And at the same time, too, I'm more than happy to accept friend requests on Facebook. People can join me there, and I do interact and converse with people. I'm not inaccessible to people. I'm easy to find, and I do engage and interact with people. So I'm not snooty that way.
No, good stuff, man. Well, hey, I do thank you for joining me tonight. I'm going to try and have you on again soon.
Oh, great! Yeah, that would be fantastic. I definitely enjoyed discussing these subjects. So anytime anybody wants to trot out any kind of specific topic that they would like to hear both of us expound upon, that's absolutely great. And at the same time, too, I do applaud what you're doing, Mike. I understand now that have become a full-time advocate of freedom, and you are relying on donations. So if you're not going to plug yourself, I will plug you. And for all the people that are listening to you, I absolutely encourage that people do support you.
Well, thank you, man. I really do appreciate that. To those who might want to, since you brought it up, Victor, I might as well point them to the website. Just go over to voluntaryvirtues.com, and you can't miss the donate link. But there's also a bunch of other good information there on the website. I have 180 and 180. I have some articles. I have a variety of stuff. I'm about to put a podcast up there, so every single one of my interviews will be podcasted going into the future and on iTunes. So, we're continuously growing, and the viewership continues to go up, the subscribers continue to go up, and it's looking pretty positive, man. So,
well, that's good, yeah. And for those people where bucks might be tight with them, like there's other ways that they can support you. Absolutely, like if it's not if donating can be done, absolutely do that. But there's other ways to work with you, help you out too. Is by simply posting a lot of your videos on their own wall and encouraging and subscribing to your channel and just getting the word out there and posting your videos, say on their Twitter or Facebook.
Yeah, and buying Victor Pross's art too, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Awesome, buddy. Hey, I'm going to have you on soon, and I appreciate all your time and doing the research on this topic. It's obviously something we needed to tackle. So, thank you so much, Victor.
Okay, talk to you soon, Mike.
Later, buddy.
Bye-bye.
All right, guys, just want to close this out. Obviously, Victor really nailed on the Venus Project. He did a really good job, and so I do want to thank him again for that. Thank you guys, every listener out there, for joining us tonight. Without you and your donations and your time and your support, none of this would be possible. So I do want to thank you guys for making this show possible and helping us spread the message of freedom. And I do hope you found our discussion tonight beneficial and educational. If not, let me know why. Throw a comment down in the discussion section below in the comment section, and I will try to read it and respond to you and get your input. Maybe I'm wrong. If you want to be on my show and you want to talk to me about how wrong I was, I would love to have you on, and that's pretty easy to get up in contact with me. You can just message me on Facebook. So anyway, thank you guys so much for your time and support and effort pushing the message of freedom forward, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Actually, on Tuesday I have Adam Kokesh coming up, and on Saturday I have Jeffrey Tucker. I have interviews every day, just these are some headlines. So be looking over at Mike Shanklin on YouTube, and I will talk to you guys soon. Thank you so much. Talk soon.